Well, we now know what games are officially in the running for all of the categories at the 2019 Game Awards. And as with some review scores, as we saw earlier this year with Death Stranding and Pokemon Sword and Shield, to name only a few, these shows can be quite controversial. Pitting one thing against another is always going to make someone mad. So that is why we're not even going to bother broaching that topic specifically today. For the purpose of this conversation, Angry Birds 5 could win literally every award and it wouldn't change what we're talking about one lick. And you and I both know it's fun to watch the awards, but we're really there to watch the announcements. And if you're watching content on this channel and saw the thumbnail and the title of this specific video, then you probably are most interested, just like I am, in what Nintendo's gonna announce. So let's speculate on that. What could Nintendo announce at the Game Awards 2019? Let's talk about it. First, let me say that there are several Nintendo games that were nominated for awards this year, and for us Nintendo fans, that is fun and exciting. And we'll probably be talking about that some more on our podcast this weekend. There's a link above and in the description below to check out the channel where we post that. And on the off chance that you don't know what a podcast is, let me fill you in real quick. It's me and AJ talking for like 2 hours about Nintendo news, what games we're playing, questions and comments from you guys, and just all sorts of little fun stuff like that. There's a lot of inside jokes there too. You'll get it. I think podcasts make for great background noise on my way to and from work or school if you're in school. And outside of Twitter or Discord, it's one of the most direct ways that you can interact with us. So go ahead and check that out. But in the meantime, let's get to it. The Game Awards show has been rapidly gaining in popularity in the past couple of years as it went from 1.9 million live viewers in 2014 to over 26 million in 2018. This is certainly a huge production, and as we've already said, although the Game Awards themselves have something to do with it, they're certainly not the centerpiece of the viewership's focus. Really, in the same way that half of the Super Bowl audience is probably watching for funny commercials or a great halftime show, that's probably largely the same case here. And what's more is that the Super Bowl producers know that there's a whole audience that they have to cater to on those facts alone, so they'll make sure that those elements are of high caliber. And similarly, because Jeff Keighley and the rest of the production staff is so aware of our viewership being owed to those announcements, they make sure that there's good announcements for the people that want to watch them. So that's great. It's just one more event to make E3 feel kind of insignificant. While there are always lots of great announcements for all varieties of gamers, we're going to be focusing specifically on Nintendo announcements here. So to be able to make some grounded speculations for the future, we'll also have to take into account what's been announced in years past. After it migrated from being the Spike Video Game Awards at the end of 2013, the Game Awards had its first show in 2014. This was a strong kickoff year for Nintendo with a good precedent set when Super Mario Maker got a trailer, which had been announced earlier that year, and even more importantly, Miyamoto and Aonuma showed up in a pre-recorded video with Breath of the Wild in action, another game that had appeared for the first time at E3 that year. And this was a great way to start the trend of Nintendo's announcements at the Game Awards, especially because the next year they didn't show anything. Thanks, Wii U. But the next year, the Switch had been announced, Breath of the Wild had been extensively shown off at E3 2016, and Nintendo came to the awards show with a gripping new trailer for that upcoming masterpiece. The following year was right at the tail end of one of Nintendo's quantitatively and probably qualitatively best year ever, when in 2017 Nintendo was once again soaring for the first time in quite a while. There was a lot of curiosity about what could be announced here, and finally we saw Reggie come on stage and announce a Switch port for Bayonetta 1 and 2, and then a teaser for Bayonetta 3. And they finished off with the trailer for the final DLC pack for Breath of the Wild, finally marking 3 Game Awards with Breath of the Wild announcements of some kind. Frankly, the Breath of the Wild DLC was heavily speculated to show up during that time, but the Bayonetta news was actually quite a pleasant surprise. Finally, going into the Game Awards of 2018, last year, instead of having no specific expectations at all, it seemed everyone thought they knew what would get announced, and specifically one thing, but we'll get to that a bit later. What was announced, however, was pretty much pure shock all around. Sayonara Wild Hearts, a very artsy rhythm game that released in 2019, was announced with marketing for Nintendo Switch, and certainly no one had any clue what that was. And then Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 was announced as a Switch platform exclusive. This was out of left field to say the least, but it made some sense in retrospect as the Russo brothers did announce an award at the show. And finally, out of the blue was Joker, revealed as the first DLC fighter for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And obviously this one was unexpected because Persona 5 was a PlayStation exclusive game, but the announcement was still very exciting. And that is everything that was announced for Nintendo at the past Game Awards, which of course brings us to this year, which means it's time to get guessing. Before I do that though, comment down below what you think may show up. And the name of the game isn't so much being right as it is just having fun discourse, so have a good time. And don't bother being the actually guy, because of the things we're gonna guess, statistically, most of them are gonna be wrong. So we may as well just see where that gets us. And on that note, here's all of my guesses and the reasons why I think each of them may be at least a little bit plausible. First up, this is a bit of an easy guess, but there are fewer and fewer long-time Switch announcements that haven't come to fruition. But Bayonetta 3 certainly is one of them. Of these predictions, I would be tempted to say that I'm the least certain about this one, but even my reasons there may be faulty. I do think this game is liable to come out in 2020, and the reason Nintendo and Platinum have held off so long on giving more information was simply not to muddy the water with talks of Astral Chain and Bayonetta 3 at the same time. To be honest, when this game was announced in 2017, I kind of expected it would have been out by now, but here we are. And the reason I'm kind of second guessing whether this would show up at the Game Awards was because it was announced at the Game Awards before, so I don't know if they'd want to use up their slot on a game that was already announced at the Game Awards. Then again, they did that for Breath of the Wild, but then again, that was Breath of the Wild. So all in all, I'd give this a lower likelihood, but it's certainly possible. Next is something that seems almost certain, but is very hard to predict accurately. Third parties are becoming more prevalent on the Switch, and not only that, but the idea of third-party exclusives is much more likely now. So, although Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 was Nintendo published, it was developed by Team Ninja and was a Switch exclusive. So I think whether the game be more like Rogue Company, a third-party multiplat with Nintendo-directed marketing, or perhaps a game more akin to Astral Chain, an actual third-party Switch exclusive. And this is a good opportunity to bring up something that I think is worth noting, is that companies know their audience here at the Game Awards, which is more serious games. So that's games that the average casual gamer would look at and say, yeah, that is a game. So within that, there's quite a range, but you can assume that every game is going to be geared towards teens or adults, but not so much kids. So that would apply in this catch-all third-party territory as well. Continuing on, let's bring back up a topic we put on hold a little bit ago. It was the rumor from 2018's Game Awards, Metroid Prime Trilogy. The controversy here is that before the Game Awards last year, every industry insider and their mother was teasing Metroid Prime Trilogy to be showing up at the Game Awards. And then it didn't. So here's a quick rundown of what the general narrative seems to suggest. In 2017, Nintendo announced Metroid Prime 4 because they didn't want backlash from announcing a 3DS Metroid game. But although this announcement was prudent to appease fans, for the game's sake, it was announced way too early. It seems Bandai Namco was working on Prime 4 along with Nintendo, and when it came time for the Game Awards in 2018, we were probably supposed to see Metroid Prime Trilogy and a teaser for Metroid Prime 4, in a similar way to Bayonetta 1, 2, and 3 in 2017. But just weeks before the Game Awards, there was a check-in on Prime 4, and it was not going well at all. So they told us in January that it was scrapped and given to Retro to start from the ground up. But yeah, probably in that time, they also decided to just hold the trilogy close to their chest until they decide to announce it later. Rumor has it even that the trilogy is completely done, but they're just holding on to it until the right time. And my preference certainly is for them to come out way before Prime 4 to give everybody enough time to complete 3 games before their sequel comes out. So I'm hoping that even though Metroid Prime 4 is probably several years away, we'd still get a Metroid Prime Trilogy announcement at the Game Awards, and then a cinematic teaser trailer or something like that for Metroid Prime 4, and then they can just keep giving us updates about it every Game Awards like they did Breath of the Wild. But speaking of Breath of the Wild, my next prediction is that if we don't see anything at all Metroid related, it's entirely possible we may see Breath of the Wild's sequel at this show. I made a video just last week about how I think this game has a pretty great chance of showing up in 2020 and how it would be a smart business decision, so showing off just a little more of this game would be perfect for the Game Awards. After Breath of the Wild's tenure, it seems like Nintendo would be the kind of company that would want to double down on the exposure that they know works. They've got a huge audience that's not always watching Nintendo, so they want to be promoting system sellers here, and this is just about the best new system seller that they've got. There's not a whole lot more to say on this, other than it would be awesome. But the last prediction is probably the most controversial of all. The context is pretty straightforward in that I think they're going to announce the last Smash Fighter for the Fighters Pass 1 here, but the pick would be monumental. AJ made a video about Smash Fighters he'd like to see a few weeks ago, but this one wasn't on that list. It's just one that I think would blow the mind of gamers all over and would be huge press for everyone involved. Master Chief for Smash has been a joke for over a decade now, but is now at a point where it would be simultaneously mind-blowing, but also finally make sense. There are so many thoughts here, but the fact of the matter is that Microsoft has been playing nice with everybody lately, and especially Nintendo. In 2019 alone, Cuphead, Ori, New Super Lucky's Tale all came to Switch, not to mention Banjo actually coming to Smash, which actually may be a point against Master Chief on the off chance that Nintendo is trying to diversify the companies that are represented in Smash. They might not want to have two Microsoft ones, but taking that aside, the thing I keep coming back to is this is the only event where both companies would benefit from this announcement. Usually at a Nintendo Direct or at E3 during Nintendo's presentation, Master Chief would be a bad announcement there because Microsoft wouldn't get any of that press, and that's a big announcement for them. But then similarly, you wouldn't see a Smash trailer in a Microsoft presentation. So this, the Game Awards, the only place that's had the CEO of Nintendo, Xbox, and PlayStation all on stage at the same time at the 2018 Game Awards, watch last year's if you want, would be the perfect place to show that these companies are coming together on something really big. And I'm expecting Halo Infinite announcements there anyway, and this could also mean Master Chief Collection may be coming to Switch, which has also been rumored for a while now. Gracious, 2019 is just nuts. But that's what I think. What do you think? Is there any chance that these games will show up at the Game Awards, or are you expecting just all Angry Birds 5 announcements and that's it? Let me know all that and more in the comment section down below, and then we'll take some of those comments, bring them to our podcast, which I mentioned earlier. Remember, you should listen to our podcast because it's fun, and we'll talk about some of those comments there. It's a good old time. And while you're down there, go ahead and like the video and subscribe to fanatixfour for more content like this every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern time from myself and from AJ, and then also listen to our podcast. It's up at Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern time. That is all for me. See you guys next week.